house tour. What are you saying, Ms. Carpenter, to us?
Yeah. Like a lot of crazy stories, crazy conversations. I think, you know, my
sweet image that you used to be. And I'm like, then when I came out, you thought I was too provocative. It's like you can never win. No matter what you do, at the end of the day, you can't please everybody.
You find offensive?
Ian, you put a creased, naked woman on all fours with a dog collar around her neck and a leash. And a man's arm extended out up to here, holding on to the leash and pushing a black glove in her face to sniff it. You don't find that offensive?
No,
you don't find that sexist?
check every box for everyone to like everything about them. It's never been that way.
Yeah.
It's never gonna be. So I'm okay if Tommy from Arkansas doesn't like what I do.
But what's wrong with being sexy? I mean, there's no
Sexist.
Okay, so Sabrina Carpenter is kind of a loser, but I think that that's intentional. I know that sounds a little extreme, so let's dig into a few things first. This hopefully won't veer into the very strange extremes that I've seen the discourse dive into in certain spaces online. I'm not a diehard Sabrina stan who believes that she's the modern day Britney Spears, put up on a pedestal only to be ripped apart by the misogynistic masses. We're gonna get to that, don't worry. I also don't believe that she's the new cultural villain looking to pollute the minds of the youth. I think she's extremely talented, and even though her stuff isn't necessarily for me, mainly because I'm too many things, I understand the appeal of her work and think that she's good at what she does, and is a hardworking creative. Also, while you're here, hi, hello, how are you? I am Square Symbols, a working musician who loves to explore the intersection between music, politics, and culture. And I listened to Man's Best Friend, the most recent Sabrina Carpenter release, and even though I didn't really enjoy it that much, I found it a little fascinating. After listening to the album, I digested its themes. I feel like there's so many topics left unexplored by those who might have been taken aback by the controversial album cover, or annoyed with the Puritan response to the art depicted here. So let's get into it.
Said the word sweetness. I think that you are one of the best at saying bleep you, but you say it in such a sweet way that I don't even realize you're saying what you're saying because it's so sweet and so...
So what do we know about Sabrina? Even though one can look at her small-town upbringing in East Glenville, Pennsylvania as a modest American experience, this info is loosely compromised by her aunt being Nancy Cartwright, the voice of Bart Simpson, Chucky Finster from Rugrats, and Rufus from Kim Possible, along with a host of other very famous voices. Nancy is also a huge Scientologist. I believe Nancy donated about $20 million to the Church of Scientology, so it's not hard to believe that Sabrina's entry into the entertainment industry had a little help, especially with her entry into the Disney entertainment pipeline. Sabrina has been studying voice since she was about 6, uploading covers to YouTube since she was about 10, and had the lovely support of her father, who built her recording studio around that time. It's clear that she was on the Disney Channel lifelong performer pipeline, but we'll get more into that later. From there, she dabbled in TV, recorded songs for children programming and made-for-TV movie soundtracks, eventually scoring a main cast role on Disney Channel's loose reboot series Girl Meets World, as well as a recurring role on Sofia the First. 2 shows I was sadly too old to consume, but from what I've heard, they were well received. From 2015 onward, she's been crafting her pop persona, releasing music during her tenure as a Disney actor, singer, and songwriter, a lot like the white talent before her, and eventually shedding the teen pop Disney aesthetic as she grew into her 20s, with the current aesthetic highlighting a few things: her wit and humor as an actor, with plenty of experience in theater and sitcom acting, and now that she's stepping into her life as a grown woman, her experiences dating, sex, and having a taste.
I'm so at peace, yeah, I can't drink enough.
This image loosely crystallized last year with the release of her smash hit Espresso and her 6th album Short and Sweet. Apparently, this song was everywhere last year. I thought it was solid, but didn't hear it that much. Again, I don't really be in the white people's spaces that often. This elevated Sabrina to pop princess status, and it was well deserved. She's legit been working towards this since she was about 6 years old and doing the recording music grind for about a decade now. So midsummer, when the announcement for her next album, Man's Best Friend, seemed imminent, folks were hyper-focused, beyond excited, and overwhelmingly supportive, right?
A lot of these people are keyboard warriors. They say stuff they would never say to your face.
Absolutely.
Never.
So this caused a lot of very, what one could say, charged discourse online, with folks falling into either 2 camps.
Sabrina Carpenter's new album is a perfect example of how white women get to romanticize misogyny and it still be seen as empowerment. Historically, white women have always been positioned as the default version of femininity. By extension, their womanhood is treated as delicate, desirable, and deserving of protection.
So what's the deal? Is it a healthy depiction of kink? Like, God forbid, a white lady catch a vibe, right?
This whole album cover thing way out of proportion. I feel like if you've listened to any of Sabrina Carpenter's song, she writes from the female gaze. She never really writes her song to appeal to a male audience.
Or is it loosely insidious, a tongue-in-cheek joke that can be read as pretty misogynistic and demeaning? Well, one, it's obviously rage bait, in that we're in an era where the Aryan girlies can weaponize the ambiguity of whiteness.
Often determining traits like hair color, personality, and even eye color. My jeans are blue.
Sydney Sweeny has great jeans.
Not that these situations are one-to-one, but they rely on puns linked to or allusions to ideologies that are rooted in white supremacy. One being actual fucking eugenics, like what the actual fuck was this? And the other being an ironic joke about demeaning women. You know, man's best friend being dogs, while Sabrina takes part in what seems to be consensual kink. What both of these marketing campaigns highlight is that we're in a very specific era, regardless of how you align on the political spectrum or think about the cover. Within the modern attention economy, it's clear that in a post-Me Too era, jokes about one's whiteness or jokes about misogyny are the new edgy norm. Definitely reeks of the Gamergate era of the mid-2010s, but this is the centrist or apolitical marketing norm currently. So insisting that either of these women have dedicated political stances based on their marketing campaigns is where folks get a little bit trapped up. The folks caught up in the rage bait view the political divide, the Overton window, or how they engage in politics in a very cut and dry binary, one that assumes intent, instead of looking deeper into the function of the state and how this country is consuming itself. But I'm rambling. Personally, I just find it kind of tasteless. An image tailor-made
Talk about them liking young girls, that's a gift for me.
To garner outrage or get people excited for a new project. There's no such thing as bad press, so clearly manufacturing social outrage puts Sabrina into the discourse machine, deeper into Google Trends, and keeps her name in the minds of millions of TikTokers just in time for the album release. The plausible deniability of intent to discourse farm can be waved off as puritanical hand-wringing. She sells more tickets to her shows for a tour that's already doing pretty well, I think, rakes in more cash, rinse and repeat. At the end of the day, it's good marketing. Personally, I knew it wasn't heartfelt when I saw how homie was holding her hair.
Yeah, I saw the Sabrina Carpenter album cover. My main issue with it is that's not how you grab hair. That's not how you do it. You're doing it all wrong. You're just messing up her hairstyle, which is what really is making me mad, actually. You gotta grab it from back here, and you grab it a little closer to the root. You gotta, like this, see how it got more control? See that? That's how you do it. You don't grab it from up here, from out on the ends, don't do that.
Like he's not even doing it right. Then hearing her talk about this in interviews, I knew exactly what was up.
I think between me and my friends and my family and the people that I always share my music and my art with first, it was...
And whose opinion you trust.
And whose opinion I trust very much and who know me better than anyone. It just wasn't even a conversation. It was just like, it's perfect.
Stop the cap.
Another threat that very few discussed, for solid reasons mind you, were the album's stark similarities to a segment of the 80s music satire film Spinal Tap, which is what I thought when I first saw this album cover. Mainly because I am indeed old. More to the point, that comparison makes this conversation a little bit more interesting. This is Spinal Tap, a mid-80s mockumentary that spotlights the excesses, self-importance, and lack of awareness hard rock musicians had during the era, taps in to the culture of misogyny, frail masculinity, and reckless abandon that some would say was the first nail in the coffin for the arena rock and hair metal scene. Not sure why they're making another one, but it's whatever. Well, we all do. Using the spectacle of satire with folks who actually know how the genre of music functions made it an important film within the history of comedies, mockumentaries as a genre, or musicals, if you want to call it that. So with that in mind, I was looking forward to listening to the record, with the provocative image alluding to her being self-aware or an examination of her dating history or the men that she's involved with. It honestly seemed pretty intriguing. So man's best friend must be a subversive project, right?
It's repetitive, it's cyclical, but she also acknowledges it in all of this stuff as like chasing a guy, getting with a guy, the relationship is terrible, breakup, the cycle repeats. Like, yeah, but also we're acknowledging it in the songs.
So unlike my previous listen to Short and Sweet, this record didn't really seem like it was that much fun. And to the point of the last section, not really related to the album cover in any discernible way, aside of the album visuals featuring Sabrina and the male figure together in different scenarios. Thematically, there isn't a real commentary on how they interact outside of her feeling let down, failed, or requesting basic human decency from the folks that she's dating, which, that's fine and all. But what struck me in all of this is how there's a lack of sexual or romantic agency in all this. Like, I know the tone here is all tongue-in-cheek and caked in a bunch of layers of irony. That's cool if you like that. And I don't believe that she has to spit like Gloria Steinem level feminism or whatever, but with provocative imagery like this, you'd expect there to be more depth, or at least a through line thematically with the project, or at least something deeper than I settle for emotionally unavailable men because I lack healthy boundaries or can't stand being alone. Regardless of the criticism, I do feel like this record is tapped into how a lot of normies feel about love, dating, and romance currently. And that's my take, again, as somebody who's all these things. The term that I guess best describes the vibe here is heteropessimism, which refers to
performative disaffiliations with heterosexuality, usually expressed in the form of regret, embarrassment, or hopelessness about straight experience. Heteropessimism generally has a heavy focus on men as the root of the problem. That these disaffiliations are performative does not mean that they are insincere, but rather that they are rarely accompanied by the actual abandonment of heterosexuality.
Sure, some heteropessimists act on their beliefs, choosing celibacy or the now largely outmoded option of political lesbianism, yet most stick with heterosexuality, even as they judge it to be irredeemable. Even incels, overflowing with heteropessimism, stress the involuntary nature of their condition.
In this case, the tongue-in-cheek nature of Sabrina's writing not only functioned as a self-soothe, but also a commodification of the term, based on the different socioeconomic conditions that indeed make dating, if you're a cis and straight, a living nightmare. And both through her image and the songwriting, her brand can have her cake and eat it too. She gets to perform peak aestheticized white desirability while also performing relatability by being romantically unfulfilled. The songs aren't concerned with learning or growing through painful experiences, but more or less play into the feeling of constant dissatisfaction, namely with the opposite sex.
Unlike Afro-pessimists, heteropessimists bear responsibility for exactly what they identify as irredeemable, and this responsibility cannot evaporate via disavowal, however much they might like it to. A certain strain of heteropessimism assigns 100% of the blame for heterosexuality's malfunction to men, and has thus become one of the myriad ways in which young women, especially white women, have learned to disclaim our own cruelty and power. Like most lesbians, I have found myself on the receiving end of approximately 100,000 drunk straight women bemoaning their orientation and insisting that it would be so much easier to be gay. Sure, it probably would be. That men are trash is not something I'm personally invested in disputing. Yet in announcing her wish to be gay, the speaker carelessly glosses over the fact that she has chosen to stay attached to heterosexuality, to remain among the slightly more than 2 or 3 women who are, despite everything, still straight.
Now, I'm not saying that Sabrina should immediately adopt political lesbianism, but more or less her music, this album specifically, the product, adapts to, as well as perpetuates adhering to the status quo, as a prisoner of one's sexuality instead of an active participant of it. And I think that makes sense. And I feel like that's what makes this record so fascinating to me. Like, it's so straight, although I love that Coleman Domingo was in the video. He's so iconic, nailed it in every scene. So all in all, it communicates very little, nothing subversive really. It's just a pulpy album cover a la the 70s vinyl market, but thematically it highlights a lack of romantic agency, uses pretty passive language as a joke to kind of mask pain, or it comes across as so anxiously attached that she can never really give the person that she's interested in space to live their life without feeling like they're no longer interested. And for the record, can we stigmatize this type of behavior? Like, I don't care if you're gay, straight, ace, or whatever. If you cannot be alone with your own thoughts, you can handle being away and not knowing what someone you're dating is doing every hour of the day, then maybe you should, kind of unpack that. People are fully functional human beings with their own lives and emotions, and you are not owed access to them 24/7. I shouldn't really have to say that, but the lack of us having things to do outside of being on our phones all damn day has really rewired our brains in regards to how much access we have to each other. And we'll get into that later, but I just wanted to make that clear now. All of this consistency discourse, performative masculine or feminine energy, is really just a spotlight on the fear of abandonment a lot of us have. And from what I've seen, instead of addressing these wounds internally through therapy or understanding our material conditions, we seek to have more control over the people that we're in relationships with to avoid feeling hurt. And I can understand that. It's important to remember that community building, building friendships, or exploring romance comes with risk. And yes, we live in a scary world, but intimacy requires a level of vulnerability. But as always,
they want their dreams without their nightmares.
The project, and for the most part, the simple pop formula, is so hyper-focused on this portrayal of heterosexuality because it's an infinite money glitch.
Precisely because it is bound to fail and yet endeavors to succeed, the project of heterosexual identity is propelled into an endless repetition of itself.
So with this project, we get a reluctant enjoyment of intimacy and expression for said intimacy, but not really coming from a place of getting what one wants on their terms, or doing something for the fun of it, or even two people openly communicating about what they want. Rather, we have consistent failure and sexual frustration, all the while she tailors her body for the male gaze, with a lot of the hang-ups between the two parties having more to do with the lack of communication around expectations and whatnot. Which is why I'm gonna need everybody to get a lot more gay and a lot more autistic right now. The hang-ups or frustrations around romance is perfectly juxtaposed with the overall aesthetic of Sabrina as a petite vintage white pinup, indulging in looks from the 60s and 70s and 80s, embodying the women of yesteryear, a classic femininity, very Mad Men-esque type beat without the social commentary. So that's what I thought of the record. It's interesting in that I find it a little regressive in how it engages with its provocative imagery, only to kind of recoil at the thought of bathing in its love for the devious shit. At a time where, within the pop mainstream, artists are feeling more comfy expressing their desire for alternative lifestyles, kink, or the role that pleasure plays in their romantic lives. One could look at Darling I from Chromacopia by Tyler the Creator, or the third studio album by FKA Twigs, Eusexua. Now, I know, different things are different, but these are two pop records that came out this year, so I feel like I can kind of talk about them. They also frame desire, intimacy, and sexuality in very different ways, where I feel like on Man's Best Friend, so many of the feels, intimacy, desires, and self-actualization are external, which is why they are lacking or inequitable. Whereas the kink, desire, and sexuality expressed on Eusexua embraces fear, anxiety, and the pain that comes with intimacy. Highlights the agency made in those romantic connections, even though some of them may be temporary. Stresses the need for intimate experiences to be fun or trauma-informed, and isn't afraid to voice yearning or desire openly without it being caked in 7 layers of irony. It's honest. Now, the differences can come from Twigs and her experience being a more mature songwriter who's honestly always dabbled in kink and alternative production in ways of expressing oneself. But that's a different topic. So I know what you're thinking. I just said a bunch of shit, and to be clear, there's nothing wrong with enjoying Sabrina's music. But is it political? In more ways than I just mentioned, yes. But to fully understand that, we're gonna have to understand something else.
Very good, you got it on the first try.
So, what's up? Well, actually, me and Justin were wondering how you guys got the name for your band, Escape.
Yeah, I heard you guys got it because you were in this recording studio next to this burning oil refinery, and you guys escaped all these big barrels of oil were blowing up around you. Boom, boom, boom.
What's constantly brought up in combos around Sabrina's sultry persona is her past as a Disney Channel darling, an actor who primarily made content for children. And it's not hard to believe that, due to her time on children's programming, a lot of these kids see her now and proceed to ask their parents really uncomfortable questions. And for the record, it is not her responsibility to baby your shitty kid. Artists grow and change and have the right to express themselves in a way that feels good for them. But what if I told you that this phenomenon isn't necessarily new? Sabrina is on what we'd call the Disney Channel to Popstar Pipeline. I'd say that she's about Gen 3 or 4 of this media superstructure, but this term refers to child stars who break through, usually within the Disney media ecosystem. They start on children's shows made for adolescents or innocent tweens. They're usually signed to recording contracts, cater to a fan base of the same age, and get a nice little jump start of their career. It's been a pretty functional pipeline for years now. You got Gen 1, which includes Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera. Generation 2, which gave us pop country mainstays like Miley Cyrus or Selena Gomez. And the next gen of pop girlies like Olivia Rodrigo and Sabrina Carpenter. And with that, the performative sexuality becomes incredibly predictable. Like, look at me, I'm not this cute little kid anymore, I fuck. That being the only way to communicate that they've matured. How this materialized in decades prior were Justin and Miley, to a lesser extent, both cosplaying an edgy black persona. Justin choosing to primarily work with Timberland and make R&B songs, and Miley doing whatever the fuck this is. So it's not absolutely unfounded that Sabrina, looking to embody a classic and definitively white look as her grown and sexy persona, is indicative of our current political climate. But that's just my assessment. Don't shoot me. We've been moving more into an anti-woke, hostile to diversity place since our government decided to over-police BLM and pro-Palestine protesters. A lot of P's in that. But I do find that a little bit interesting, where I'm like, back in the day, at least when I was coming up, you signified that you were more mature by just adopting an edgy black persona instead of like, now it seems like people who are growing and maturing are leaning more into like the white and country look. And since these children are now manufactured in factories, being focused on being the perfect entertainer since they were about 10, they become the primary faces to push products and ideology indirectly. So what I guess I'm saying is these images are very intentional. And with discourse around Sabrina, I see so many comparing a lot of good faith criticism to the media torment of Britney Spears. And I want to briefly talk about that.
Parent and keep all of this away from your kids.
Well, that's really sad that she said that. Ew. You know what? Like, I'm not here to, babysit her kids.
So yeah, I'd like to concede that a lot of this convo circles back into a weird sort of puritanism, but the tongue-in-cheek nature of Sabrina's brand, especially with the new album rollout, does leave a lot to be desired. The vibes were definitely a little bit off, mainly because she rage baited. Britney, on the other hand, came into the pipeline before this process was fully figured out. Both the media backlash and the torment she experienced were products of a very deep and well-documented misogyny of the 90s and the 2000s, exemplified in the treatment of Anita Hill or Monica Lewinsky, along with the individualistic Gen X lens many folks apply to societal problems of the time. With them focusing on the most visible aspects of these problems, or what they assume these problems to be it boy bands or pop stars, instead of the labels exploiting and abusing actual children. There were countdowns to certain actresses turning 18. And even if we look at the breakout hit Britney Spears had for her first big single, we can see that the imagery is kind of messed up. But I see that this romanticization of young girls hasn't really gone anywhere. Anyways, for the most part, for these big pop stars, they usually weren't the ones writing the songs, deciding the outfits, or how these images were portrayed in the advertising material. In general, a lot of the artists of the time weren't really informed in regards to their rights, which is why so many of them were exploited. To an extent, this isn't exactly the case today. Sure, most of these artists work with decent-sized teams and have the help of a lot of talented people. Like even Beyonce hired this white woman to help her write those country songs. But to my point, the business has somewhat evolved, with singers taking a more autonomous role, understanding that they are huge brands that employ dozens, sometimes hundreds of people. All this to say, if your marketing is loosely dog whistly, you deserve some smoke. However, folks haven't been normal about their frustrations around this charged imagery. But why?
The issue here is the lack of kink education, okay? That's what's lacking here, all right? People don't know how to choke properly. People don't know how to slap properly. Don't know how to grab hair properly. You don't know how to tie people up properly. Like, you can do nerve damage if you don't know what the hell you're doing. It's goddamn amateur hour out here.
So according to a lot of sources, a couple books, a few articles, people on TikTok, young folks aren't really getting busy like they used to. Now, this, one, is none of my business, and two, is pretty understandable as we exist in a failed state, But there are very easy to understand social factors at play here. First thing, many of us were indeed left behind in regards to health and sex education, with most of the education going something like this.
Don't have sex, because you will get pregnant and die.
This is compounded by the lack of spaces for young people to go to actually interact with each other. Like when I was in my 20s, there were so many things, like gallery openings, art events, poetry readings, shows, open mics, places to dance. Like there was actually stuff for me to do. And as I got older, I've seen a lot of these spaces stripped away or disappear entirely. This has made our phones the primary way that we all interact with each other. Second, Carter Sherman, reproductive health and justice reporter and author of The Second Coming, Sex and the Next Generation's Fight Over Its Future, looks at massive societal changes like the Me Too movement and COVID as things that have greatly changed our intimate landscape. I'm not saying that the Me Too movement made men scared or that feminists are ruining intimate playtime for everybody. But the systemic lack around proper sex education, lack of knowledge on things like consent, how to discuss intimacy, or basic things like how to advocate for your own sexual health have kind of made this sort of intimacy very scary for a lot of people. Young people specifically, regardless of gender. And these folks usually only have adult content to fill these information gaps, making the early intimate experiences not fun, traumatic, or in some cases dangerous. Add to that the Thanos snap that was COVID, and many young people missed out on so many formative experiences. Society has become extremely monitored as well. We live in the public panopticon, where everyone can see what you're doing and with who. And now, everyone is afraid of being embarrassed or being vulnerable. Hence the tongue-in-cheek nature of Sabrina's appeal. What we're left with is a generation kind of scared of intimacy and one that hasn't really had much space to embrace a level of physical intimacy prior generations had more access to. But that's just what I think. What do you think? Did you hate this video? Do you love Sabrina Carpenter? What was your favorite song on Man's Best Friend? If you made it this far in the video, leave a dog emoji, I guess? Is that too much? I don't know. That seems like it's some bad taste. And if you want to support the channel, consider joining my Patreon. I've been uploading scripts there, just like to see if people like reading this stuff too. But I'll also be putting up some tour footage from my last round of travels. I have a lot of really cool shows that I've played, and I really want to share those with y'all. Yeah, so that starts at $1 if you have that, and there's other tiers if you want to support a little bit more. Also, I'm working on a documentary about Black punks, so if you know any Black punks, please email me. You can find my email in my link tree. I think I have that linked in the description, and if not, it's on my page. I don't necessarily have anything else to say, so I think I'm done. But if you stayed this far, I have a surprise. Yo, he does not like this. He does not like this at all. He's my beef. I know.